great to see you all. Um, I first chatted to Jacob, maybe about a year ago now. I can't quite remember. We had a good chat and stayed in touch a bit. And really pleased that he's agreed to join us here. I've listened to a few of his podcasts. I really recommend them if you haven't yet. But he's doing having some amazing conversations and doing some great work in kind of bringing these two parts of his own life together and doing something creative with it. So he's going to tell you more about that. And I'm going to hand over to him now. Jacob, thank you.
Thank you, Annette. And thank you, Hunt. It's great to be here. Great to see and meet all of you. I'm still quite new to the Ligare community, although I've joined a few times. And it's a great honor for me to be exploring this topic of Christianity and psychedelics, which really feels at the heart of my life and my journey. So a little bit about me, just basic sort of bio stuff. My focus and devotion of the last 4 or 5 years has really been around dialogue and the transformative potentials of dialogue one-to-one and in groups. And alongside that, I've been on my own medicine journey. I've been in deep inquiries into collective healing through various modalities. I'm involved in men's work and founded an initiative called The Resonant Man last year, which holds a regular circle. And so I'm really interested in that intersection of the sacred and our own evolution and how we can kind of foster that collectively between us. And from my standpoint, this meeting point, this melting point, this absolutely fascinating intersection of psychedelics, plant medicine, and the traditions behind them, and Christianity, the deep substrate of Western culture, something that I think lives really, really deeply within us, and I discovered in my own journey. This is really where it's at for me. And we can get a little bit more into that. But before we begin, what I like to do when I'm holding space and creating space is actually offer a little bit of meditation and music just to create the right kind of field where we can all begin to share from a deeper place, and there will be opportunity for more dialogue after my initial presentation. So wonderful to be here with you. And the invitation is really to start tuning into the next few breaths. Finding the next inhalation at your nostrils. Gradually slowing down as you breathe out. Letting the momentum of your day and any thoughts that you're coming in with just be suspended here for a moment. And letting your breath really bring you home. Letting the center of your awareness sink a little deeper down from the head into the fullness of the body. Feeling the fullness of the breath. And really starting to become present for what's here now. We are not alone in the space today. We are already coming into a field of connectivity, relationship, of shared presence. And on the next breaths, just seeing what it's like to really listen with the body. Listening into this field. Beginning to invite the possibility of something new, something unknown, something mysterious. We open a space for the meeting of the mysteries of Christianity and of plant medicine. So gradually coming with your breath, opening your eyes when you feel ready to, starting to connect with the other presences, the other souls in the room. Imagining what has brought us all here. What is the strange attractor that has us gathering in this moment? And perhaps that's something we can all share in. So as I open this, I'm struck that there's something very Christian about sharing a story, offering a testimony, and being a participant in a Christian space has been a very relatively new part of my experience. My father and my mother were both Christian counselors when they were young adults. My father was a minister to a young alternative Christian rock type community in the UK. And so I grew up in that milieu until I was about 8 years old, surrounded by lots of friendly faces of that community. And my father had a burnout as a leader. They stepped back from that church. There was some issues with leadership, the nature of which I myself don't understand. But in any case, church receded from my life. And my father, rather funnily, it was the time when you had a landline telephone and not a mobile. And the telephone was always, always ringing. And there was a period for about a year, maybe a year and a half, when the phone would ring and we'd be at the dinner table and my dad would be like, don't answer the phone. Because he was so overcooked on being in that service mode to all of these people. So in any case, my teens featured an encounter with Richard Dawkins' God delusion. Agnosticism gave way to atheism. And by the time I was at university, I was pretty emotionally bottled up, rationalist, atheist kind of young man. And I really sensed that atheism was a deep disconnection from myself in many ways. And it was a disconnection from mystery. It was a disconnection from the real moreness and aliveness at an embodied level. Yet somewhere in my cultural DNA, seeds had been left. I had a fascination from a young age with the counterculture in the 60s and that whole soup of civil rights and Vietnam and, of course, the LSD. So I found myself on an exchange program in the US when I was 19, and with my first girlfriend, we tripped acid in San Francisco on a weekend, and that really was the great first opening to the wow, there's a lot more that's possible in human experience. And then the years subsequent to that, I can't claim to have yet come into a sense of the sacred, I was still alienated from the language, the body of the church. But it opened me to a sense that there was a there. There was something more to move towards. So I started meditating. I started doing yoga. I became very interested in cannabis and conscious relationship with cannabis during my time in California. And so all of these things became these sort of doorways to a deeper, richer space of experience. And whilst I continued to be super intellectual and did my bachelor's degree and my master's, alongside that, there was this explorative journey and this sense of inquiry into what's possible in my own consciousness. And so in a sense, I've been addicted to insight. I've had a virtuous addiction to insight for most of my life. And eventually that did lead me to mushrooms, which I would say demarcated a transition from an exploration of my own consciousness and a sense of a cerebral sort of melt and sensuous, polychromatic, musically rich experience into an experience in which I'm coming into relationship with something else, a sense of a felt presence of another. And that really became my frame of reference for God, even though even at that time, the word God for me was, it was sort of over here to the side. But I was like, if I, that's what God means to me. I think another really relevant piece of my journey has been the self-sacrificial software that Christianity can leave in many of us. And so I made a lot of really self-sacrificial moves in intimate relationships and partnerships in my early years, which had the effect of, really, really deeply wounding me and inviting wounds much deeper into me than perhaps they needed to be. As a young man, I didn't really have a great present relationship with my father or with men around me who were initiating and guiding me. So it was very much self-guided, guided by peers and YouTube. And so I hold that paradox through my journey that in a way, my misapprehension of Christian virtue, which was to be self-sacrificing to the extreme, opened me to wounds which could only be healed through grace and could only be healed through something beyond myself. And that's really my fundamental understanding of healing, is that it requires coming into relationship with something beyond myself. And so that began for me still through psychedelics, through nature. I sought to find God in the forests. I sought to bring my own inner fragmentation into a larger wholeness. And that was a beautiful thing. Just pausing here, I know I'm transmitting quite a lot of story into the space. I'm really appreciating all of you holding and receiving it. And I think I want to skip forward a moment here to this very, very, very strange and unexpected experience that I have had of Christianity in some sense creeping up on me, of Christianity sort of coming up through the ground of my psyche. I can remember meditating in churches, even when I had no relationship to any of the symbolism in them. I enjoyed the spaces. And I enjoyed the sense of connection to history and heritage, having grown up in England. And then in Germany, I found an interesting way of relating to a culture that was quite different to my own, but also similar. And I found myself in a village in Bavaria during COVID years, which was very Catholic in the Bavarian Alps. And I remember walking into one of their Bavarian Alpine Catholic masses with the morning sun beaming through these orange windows and all of the smoke coming up and the banners and everything. And I felt in that moment, wow, Catholicism has some psychoactive technologies that I didn't know about. And so Yeah, not long after that, I had a really intense breakup, which induced a dark night of the soul, which lasted about 6 months. And I lost my fiance. I moved country from where I was at home. I changed work. I was disrupted on every single level possible. And it was a return to rock bottom in many ways, moving back to Bournemouth. And in that place, I found this trifecta of practices, which became my new foundation to rebuild my life. And that was prayer, rap, and going to the gym. And so I was really in the grind. I was living in some kind of hotel that had been converted into living accommodations. There was nothing too great about it, but in that place, I had these moments of anguish which opened. And I can remember lying on my bed, just like anguish, like, wow, my heart feels crucified. I really understand crucifixion to be the relevant metaphor for what my heart has undergone. And in that place, this presence of peace, this just coming through, and the sort of like Shroud of Turin like face coming up through the ground of my awareness. And so, yeah, felt rescued, rescued in those moments of anguish. And I doubled down on prayer. And I also ended up in a Catholic church there in Bournemouth every day. And yet still I was alienated from the mass. I was alienated from the church. And it was a very, very personal relationship. And finally, then I have this artistic alias that was born out several years earlier, Culture Pilgrim. And I started to really live into that Culture Pilgrim, that sense of like I'm moving through these different cultures and different landscapes of mind. And I'm on a pilgrimage. I'm journeying towards some destination, some sense of communion that is beyond the horizon. And so I eventually left the UK. I went fully nomadic, and I bounced around for a long time. I connected with many beautiful people from the web communities that had so well supported me during my journeys. And I ended up in Mexico sitting with ayahuasca and bufo on a beautiful retreat with another close friend of mine who, also coming out of the psychedelic milieu, Jordan Bates, had been connecting with his Christic heritage. And that was another moment of healing being poured out that didn't seem possible, grace that didn't seem possible, and release. And the beauty of plant medicine is the depth to which it brings us into the wisdom of the body, the opening of the body, and teaches us these different embodied technologies of yawning, shaking, laughter, the vast, vast spectrum of different kinds of crying that I didn't know about until a few years ago. But there's a lot of different varieties of release. And for me, this has become a constant process, because when I can release those blocks that I pick up on, and I pick up on a lot because I am a kind of energy sensitive person, my eyes become clear again. I can see the world anew. And from that place, I feel more connected with divinity. So coming out of all of that, I've begun this new project, Christianity Beyond Itself. And that's been taking place through my podcast, Sense Space, and in the context of dialogues and writing, and also through my rap music, which has come a long way in the last few years. And Christianity Beyond Itself for me means a number of things. First of all, I think like this space, I imagine it is a meeting place where people who are coming out of, who are deconstructing from aspects of church culture that have been deeply limiting on their development, individuation, and coming into fullness, where those people can come together in dialogue with other people who are bearing wisdom from other paths, who also are maybe reintegrating aspects of Christianity, but they're not having a sort of linear mental conversion of I believed this and now I believe that. They're having something that is more expansive, and they're holding space in doing so for something new. And I do believe that the Christianity we've inherited holds a lot of brokenness. I think there's a lot of healing that is possible through plant medicine that is not possible through whatever means and technologies that church communities hold. I think it's really important to distinguish a Christianity of arrival and a Christianity of journey. And my felt sense is that there's a kind of trinitarian dynamic balance between Christianity as this rich body of knowledge, wisdom, the heritage, the story, the mysteries, plant medicine as living connections to earth, as healing technologies, as portals to the divine and portals to a deeper understanding of Christianity, and philosophy or dialogue and transformative dialogue as a practice of coming into mediation, of actually being able to meet one another, to grow our understanding, to enter into spaces of mutual transformation. And unfortunately, what lives today in many churches is, I'm super happy for your transformation when you're going to come and join into what I'm doing, but I'm not really interested in being transformed by what you're doing. And I'm quite closed off to that. And maybe I've even been entrained to think this is the safe and good place, and that is out there. Culture is where the danger is. Okay, so this is probably a good place to open out the presentation, and invitation really to go wherever feels alive and emergent in the space. I would love to hear anything that comes up in relation to Christianity beyond itself, and so on and so forth. But yeah, thank you for receiving all of that.
Thank you, Jacob. I love listening to you speak. You've got a real, I don't know, fluency that seems to come from somewhere very authentic in you. So thank you for that. Folks, if you want to put questions in the chat or raise a hand. Oh, Julian's already there. So we'll start there. Julian.
Hi. Thanks, Jacob. It's great to hear your journey. I was really interested when you said the difference between the Christianity of arrival and a journey. And I wanted to know what you meant by that. I'd like to say more.
I have a sense that maybe you have some things to share on that too, Julian. But I'm happy to take
I do. I'm interested in what also.
Sure. Well, I'll take a swing at it, and I'd love to hear what it means for you.
Sure.
When I think about Christianity of arrival, I'm sensing contraction. I'm feeling a grasping for security where no true security can be found. I'm thinking about some of the tendencies that can occur in church communities to try and keep everybody in that community and not really recognize the significance, importance of the going out and of the initiatory journey, which is, archetypally deeper than Christianity, but I would say really, 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 really important, and really important in my journey as well. And like a recognition that God is actually to be found out there. And I think there's probably just a lot of this, there can be a fear that, okay, well, if we let the guard down and people go out, they're not going to come back, right? And there's a kind of model of wanting to maintain that structure, but also they might be corrupted by all those things out there. And, for me, I've taken this to extremes. I've been to I've been to the reggaeton nightclubs and sought to connect with the spirit and bring down the kingdom of heaven on the dance floor and things like that. So, yeah, God is to be found out in the world and through journey. And I think the ultimate reality of what we're all doing here is a kind of soul journey, to learn things along the way.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I imagined you meant. And I too, I was a hospital chaplain once, some years ago, and the bishop came to spend some time with us at Christmas, or to lead a Christmas service. And he kind of sat in our office and didn't talk to us. He just was on his BlackBerry, as it was. And he's from the more evangelical wing of the church. And what I made of that was, we were already converted Christians, so we didn't need his input. We've arrived. His concern might be for people who haven't arrived. And I think you're saying something akin to that, that actually there's a journey that never ends. And we can be open to what comes. So for me, there's another different kind of arrival and journey, which is the tension in the tradition between place and journey. So that the Benedictine tradition would stay in a place, and go into your cell and you will find everything that you need. So I was interested in which of those you meant.
Yeah, really well put. I'm also living that particular tension as well, because after about 18 months of nomading it and seeking to practice what it means to be at home anywhere, it became clear to me, actually, the real work and journey for me now is to root in somewhere. And I found that place, and that place is Ciudad de Oaxaca in the south of Mexico. And this is a very ancient place with a deep kind of indigenous Mexican foundation, but also a very, very strong fabric of Catholicism. And I'm actually very attracted to living in a community where there is that shared fabric. And so whilst I still have massive aversion to Christian rock style modern church experiences, and it brings up a lot for me still, I've actually found a lot of medicine available in the Spanish Catholic Mass. And so of course there's a beautiful ever unfolding dance between the sense of arrival in connection with God and bringing that more and more into day by day by day, but that in itself is a changing and unfolding journey, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob, Kathy's put a comment and question in the chat, feeling lots of appreciation for what you're bringing, and asking about your connection and sense of the divine feminine. And I'm remembering listening to you and Matt Segal talk, and how delighted and encouraged I was to hear two young men talk about the need for more of the divine feminine. So yeah, what would you want to say to the group about that? She says, the question is, has your journey met the divine feminine, Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene perhaps, and the vibration they bring to Christianity?
Yeah, I love this question. Really important question for this conversation. I think one of the things I love about this land in particular is the strength of presence of Mary. Mary is almost of equal eminence to Jesus in Mexico. And when you walk around Oaxaca, sometimes in the hollow of a tree, like when the tree kind of is cut, people will paint the Virgin of Guadalupe sort of emerging out of the tree. And so there's this sense of the enchantment and almost protection of Mary here and throughout Latin America. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say I've encountered in the same sense that I had those moments with Jesus that I described, but sitting before the mother has been a huge part of my prayer journey of the last many, many years. And she brings a different flavor, I feel, to praying to God or praying to Jesus. And sometimes I like to imagine her having a kind of giant cloak and kind of just like wrapping me in the cloak like Lady Galadriel in Lord of the Rings, and just being brought into the cloak of the mother, and that sense that we can like reconnect with that womb energy as adults and be wombed in reality is beautiful. And then I would also say like it's been the kind of activations that come with the presence of ayahuasca, which many people describe as the mother, feel to me like connecting with the divine feminine within myself, and connecting with those subtle energies moving through the body, connecting with that capacity to release, to come into like a deep resting in one's feminine being, to be able to really sense and hold space. All of these things I associate with the divine feminine as well.
Yeah. Kathy, I don't know if you've got anything you want to say in response to that. Perhaps not. Jacob, I'm interested in interested in hearing more about your practice of, is it Dialogos?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, how you use it, what it's, yeah, what that
Yeah.
brings and what that brings to this conversation.
Yeah. Love to talk about that. Or rather talk from that if possible. Yeah, I encountered Dialogos probably in 2019 or so through a group of itinerant philosophers and mystics, of which Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke were leading figures. But this is really a practice that I think goes back to Socrates and the Socratic dialogue at root, and other modern instantiators of it have included David Bohm, the quantum physicist who was a student of Oppenheimer, and he had extensive dialogues with J. Krishnamurti for many, many, probably decades, and then later developed this practice of the Bohm dialogue, which is also a variant. And so when we talk about Dialogos, we're really talking about conversation that goes beyond itself, fundamentally. Many of us experience everyday chat, everyday conversation. And then there's this other possibility that can be opened up. And bringing a contemplative and meditative orientation is very helpful to opening that space. Also, having an orientation towards the unknown in the dialogue, like not knowing where the conversation is going to go, is a great condition for the possibility of what's called emergence. And that is also highly associated with flow states and the kind of conversational jazz, and a sense of like, okay, rather than us imposing what wants to happen and having an agenda for the discussion, let's be present with it and let's come into a flow with one another and discover together like what wants to flow through this dialogue. And when we really, really feel that, there's a sense of a logos. There's a sense of coming into deeper communion with being through going beyond ourselves in connection with one another. And so there's almost this conversational tantra for me of like being with myself, being with the other person, and back to myself and the other. And as I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, eventually I feel like I'm both me, I'm the other person, I'm the space in between. And then there's this flow that's coming through. And this flow is very affording of insight. It's a felt sense of wisdom. And it's really the key to what a lot of people in sense-making spaces are talking about: collective intelligence, collective wisdom. How do we tap into a human capacity that goes beyond individual minds and is a kind of communion of minds that doesn't dissolve our individuality, but actually brings it out more. And so I also see this practice of Dialogos as very in the spirit and in the lineage with Teilhard de Chardin's work, and his understanding of the sort of teleology of Christic evolution. So Dialogos for me actually came quite a long while before Christianity. And it was another one of those places where I felt, here I can tap into that same mystery and that same medicine that was available to me in those experiences with psychedelics and so on and so forth.
Mm. Are you familiar with the practice of spiritual direction? You had any connection? Because what you're describing sounds like good spiritual direction, actually. Although spiritual direction isn't quite a mutual conversation, whereas I think you're describing something that's potentially really mutual, and you come to something together. But a really good spiritual direction session will certainly have that sense of there's something more coming up in the field between you. And there are a number of us here who practice spiritual direction, but I'm thinking we could also learn from what you're describing. We could bring something more to the practice of spiritual direction through an understanding of Dialogos, which I'd really love to have more experience of.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I do think the mutuality is really key. And I think it's what distinguishes Dialogos from traditional talk therapy, in the sense that there you have an asymmetry of vulnerability, and you have one person who's client and patient, or you have one person who's minister and one who's parishioner. The Dialogos is deeply mutual, and Socrates always rejects the idea that he's the teacher. And it's also distinct from coaching oftentimes, or at least some forms of coaching, because there can be an instrumental sense in coaching of like where this is supposed to go.
Mm.
Or like one person has the wisdom of how it's supposed to unfold, whereas this is about like, being directed by spirit, being directed by intuition and tuning into that. And I would say listening ultimately is like a deep, deep listening to oneself, to the other, and also critically to what I refer to as the field, the space between us, and listening to that and starting to like give life to that. And then that actually becomes a resource for us as well that we can draw upon. And even if you and I, Annette, we develop a field, maybe with Hunt, we just keep developing this field, and then one of us isn't present and someone else comes into that field, they can still benefit from the field that's been developed there.
Mm.
So there's a mysterious, like non-local property also that's acting in these dialogues.
It also resonates with something I came across. I belong to a community called Deep Adaptation, which is a response to the meta crisis, and how can we live well in the face of all the different impending and underway crises, the ecological as well as others. And somebody there brings a form of conversation, and I can't quite remember what they call it, but it's very similar. But it involves deep listening to your bodily responses as you're listening to somebody and responding from that, rather than from our heads, which is where we're used to. There's some. I want to bring in some of the other. Hamish, I wonder if would you like to come on and share your question? Just nice to hear other voices. Thanks.
Please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jacob. That was a lovely share. Really, really interesting. Just in my experience, and it's just an N equals 1, but it might be more general than that. It's kind of easier for me and more natural for me to talk about God to some of my plant medicine friends than it is to talk about plant medicine to some of my Christian friends, right? And I know that if people take plant medicines, they're more open, they're more kind of suggestible, I guess. But I didn't know whether you think that's a generalizable role? Is that what you see? And what should we do about that? How do we build these bridges between these kind of established communities of faith as they grow and shrink and the various denominations kind of move around? Is there something we should be doing? Because if you draw those two circles, we are the tiny little bit where they meet, aren't we? This is the circles barely overlap, and we are it, really. So I just wondered whether you have a perspective on that.
That's a big question, Hamish. And one that I cannot claim to have answered, but I am walking that question and, have been dipping into local Christian communities and connecting with people. Some part of me would like to say that the Christ knows the Christ. Like the Christ within you and the Christ within the other really know one another. And so like insofar as plant medicine is really bringing someone into the Christ and Christianity is bringing someone into the Christ, then there's going to be a kind of like underlying mutual recognition. But insofar as it's happening more at a surface level, or there's these kinds of contortions and there's a sense of it's this and not that, then it's going to be harder to bridge, obviously. But again, as Annette was speaking to with like the speaking from the body, it's very important to have a somatic attunement in these kinds of conversations, especially if somebody is like conceptually been entrained and conditioned to be quite closed, like to be tuned into their body, and also to have your body be in such a state that your nervous system is kind of zeroed into divine tranquility, and that will create a sense of safety in the other person, that then there's a possibility of an opening. And I think what I'm sensing oftentimes is actually, what we encounter as like the closed-mindedness also has like an embodied signature of some degree of this is unsafe, this is dangerous, or indeed this is, satanic. So like, that would be my humble answer. But I've still been walking the question of like, is there actually a Christian community where I can actually show up? Is there a Christian community that can actually hold me and let me show up in my light? Or does actually conveying my testimony, in which plant medicine and Christianity are 100% inextricable, does that just mean I can't fit in? And then basically all I have to do is keep showing up and see what happens. And if authentically showing up allows opening and relationship, then great. And if not, then probably my purpose is to create something new or hold space for something new that isn't currently already available. But right now, participating in the dialogue with these other philosophers and seekers is where I'm finding a lot of that meaning. And it doesn't have to be in church, critically. Like for me, the men's circle I participate in is kind of a church for me, but it's not explicitly Christian, but we're coming into a felt sense of the sacred together, and we're growing in that, and we're growing in brotherly bond. So that's one of the places where it's happening for me.
Thank you.
And that makes me, one of the questions I've had for you, Jacob, but that this leads into it, is what do you see happening in your generation around all of this? So most of us here are older than you, and come from perhaps a more established kind of Christianity. And I'm really interested in what's happening here for your generation and the next generations following. That there's something different happening around spirituality and religion and that whole deal. What do you sense your generation is kind of open to?
There's such a broad spectrum when I like scan the field of my relationships, ranging from a lot of people who are still carrying the alienation from their Christian upbringing or from their schooling, and that's still living in their systems and kind of blocking really any dialogue with that. Some section of those people will undergo a crisis in which they're drawn to find deeper resources, and they'll end up finding plant medicine psychedelics or go into Buddhism or something like that. But broadly speaking, I think there is more of an openness to a kind of one mountain, many paths philosophy. I think we've grown up in such a multicultural milieu, and part of that then bleeds into the religious mentality, which is like, you know, at best, there are many paths to God, and at worst, just kind of like all truths are meaningless and equal, right? And that's kind of the two sides of it. And then there's a lot of people who are just heads down, stuck in, you know, doing their jobs in the economic machine, feeling the stress and just trying to carve out their own time on the earth without too much consideration for these matters. But I do think that the Christianity that's coming through is generally more open. A lot of people I know are coming into it through plant medicine, and that inevitably reshapes the context of it and the way it's approached.
Mm. And I was sharing with Jacob and Hunt before we started this session that at Breaking Convention, which was the convention in Exeter, that Julian and I and Kathy were there, and in fact Fiona was here, and Hamish was there for a day as well. It was really lovely to meet some of these people in person. But yeah, Jesus was on the main stage. You know, there was something happening. The real sense of this something really interesting happening around religion in general, and people feeling that maybe we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and we need to reclaim something of these traditions. And then Christianity in particular had a, you know, was on, like I say, on the main stage. So it's just really interesting to watch.
And just that provokes me to add a couple of more pieces here, I think. First is just the obvious but not spoken reality that people of my generation have come into a world that is falling apart. So the likelihood of receiving inherited truths as being valuable and self-sustaining, and it's been like this, and so it should stay like this, it just doesn't make a great deal of sense when the modes of operation that the parents functioned under no longer are true for the children. You know, they're being shackled to systems that don't make sense and themselves are breaking down.
And have contributed to the breakdown.
And have contributed to it. And then I think alongside that, you know, on the masculinity side, I think there is this, you know, people speak about crisis of masculinity, a sense of a loss of clarification about what that means. One of the interesting and troubling intersections that I see emerging now is that this search for masculinity, which I think is just like, it's necessary and essential, like it is going to happen, and we have to foster the right space to direct that, is combining with a sense of like a loss of ancestral Christian heritage in a way that is more right-leaning. And especially in like the ex-Twitter type milieu, there is this kind of like Christic medieval European crusader like aesthetic. And this, of course, is inextricable from the tensions between Islam and the West. And again, if you grew up in my generation, you grew up in a generation where this issue of jihadism and the tension between Islam and the West was unavoidably present as well. And so a lot of people feel like the West is falling apart, that it's crumbling, that it doesn't know what it is or who it is. It's incapable of defending itself. And there's a sense of, well, maybe reconnecting with some kind of masculine Christian root is the key to revivifying our civilization. Yeah. And so for me, the Christianity beyond itself and like the men's work approach within the resonant man has to kind of like carve another path through that. And that's a really interesting question of how to do that. But I think the alternative to a regression and revival is an evolution. And that's what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in something that looks like we don't know what it looks like.
Mm. All of that, and what Hunt's comment in the chat about when we enter into a worshiping community, we're entering a field that has already been established. I was thinking about you walking into churches, and there's something there, and that's the result. That's a field that's been created over centuries of people worshiping there in this kind of established thing that's also being rejected. It's a weird combination of people they go to churches and they're finding something there, or someone maybe, but they're entering a field, a presence in a church, but also something of what the church represents and stands for and wants to propagate still is no longer feels relevant. It's a weird mix. So yeah,
it just makes me. This is such a beautiful conversation. I've been mesmerized by the whole thing. But as someone that's worked in churches a lot for 20 years as a pastor and clergy person, it would just be so. I just think the church is kind of ill-equipped to meet people where they are, as a general rule. I mean, there are exceptions to that. Sort of what you said earlier on, Jacob, that the expectation, or maybe it's Julian, that the church is not necessarily interested in the people that are already here, and also not prepared fully to embrace and be open to where people are coming from. In other words, we want to kind of quickly want to get them back into the funnel. And I think that's one of the things people are rejecting. And I don't have a whole lot of, I don't have a lot more to say about that, but I think as people are rejecting these traditional communities and congregations and communions, it feels like they're not rejecting God. They're not necessarily rejecting Jesus. They're rejecting, or just not finding a place to land. And I think spiritual direction is one of the places where people are coming back in. I think that's beautiful because it's not a narrow funnel. Church can just be a narrow funnel. And I think the more we can widen that, both the input and the output, I think it'd be better for all of us. So I know some people have to leave at the top of the hour. So I did drop in a link to the Ligare, and Jacob, I'd invite you to put something in the chat if you'd like, and Annette, if you want to put your email address in. If you're in Europe or in England and the UK, interested in the group that's gathering, please email Annette or message her. And Jacob, drop in anything that you want to share. And then I didn't want to break up the conversation, but I did want to say something before people left at the top of the hour. So this has been amazing. Still ongoing, but an amazing conversation. Thanks to both of you for it.
I think most people here know where to find me. I recognize most of the names. I wonder if we want to if for those of you who can stay for a few more minutes, or if you just want to stop and feel into yourselves, feel where this has taken you. So let's take a couple of minutes just to sit back and feel the weight of ourselves in our chairs and feel into how your body is responding. So I'm sure there's stuff buzzing in your heads. There's some interest. There might be some feelings about what's been said, but also just listen to that more subtle, but more primary connection to this with your body. And where you feel it. If you're anything like me, it can take a little while to find it. But check into your heart and to your gut, into your limbs, or what energy is present in those different parts. And then what would that energy or sensation want to say in response to what we've heard and discussed here? What's curiosity or interest or reaction is your body communicating? Then let's come back, and if you've got something to offer and share from that, then let us know. If you've got another question for Jacob, or just a response to him, it'd be great to hear from you. Thanks, Hunt. Trust the unfolding. I find my body is kind of, I don't know what the word would be, vibrating or tingling or something. There's something happening, and Jacob's bringing us a beautiful insight into the something that's happening in this intersection.
Yeah, I love that intervention, Annette, and I can definitely feel that energy too. I sort of feel like a little spiraling, like energy running through me, and I think it's that sense of coming to the edge of the question, the edge of the horizon of what this deeper and fuller participation in mystery looks like. And it's very exciting for me because there's a falling away of constricting paradigms that say, well, it has to be outside of the church, or it has to be only in the church. And as I look at my own landscape, and I just invite the question of like, well, how would I redraw this? How would I reimagine this sacred ecosystem? And for me, it's like, well, yeah, I'm getting medicine, going to traditional Catholic mass right now. Awesome. I'm doing it a lot. Great. I'm learning about the rosary. And if that was my only medicine, boy, I would not be fulfilled, and I would not be connecting with God in the deepest way that I could be. So I also need my Dialogos. I need somewhere where I'm sitting in a circle of mutual inquiry. I need to be connecting with wisdom and cultivating wisdom ongoingly with others. I need my initiatory journey. And I also see that in the future of this Christianity beyond itself. I see people being part of a body, of a community, but then also the certain stage or a time there being a space to like, okay, go out, connect with this deeper medicine. And I think somewhere like Mexico, it's interesting. There's such a strong Catholic anti-drug conditioning, but there's also an underlying reverence for things like mushrooms and indigenous plant medicines. And so I think going out, connecting with the medicine, and then coming back into the body of the church, bringing that in, integrating that back in, And then, the whole host of day-by-day medicines, and we can put together our own ecology of what that looks like in practice. Art making, for me, periodically, cannabis is an incredible medicine. Cacao is effing phenomenal, really, really great. Prayer before meals, and there's such a variety of that. And the only way we're really going to arrive at like what are the best possible varieties and variations is through actually having these open and exploratory dialogues. I don't anticipate like that the priest is necessarily going to have those answers for me, but I also don't exclude the possibility that he has some answers for me.
Mm. Yeah, I like that sense of gathering the practices and places and the people that make up some kind of whole, some kind of fruitful whole, and yeah, not one part isn't enough on its own. It's about them all being together. For me, it includes gardening at the moment. And I've started going to the occasional sound bath, which is really beautiful. I'd love to learn more and get more into that. And I went and sat with Quakers recently. I'm hoping to do more of that. So there's a little Quaker house in the middle of a field up here that they've been worshipping there since 1797. So there's a field. It is literally a field, but there's a field in that building of centuries of good people sitting with the mystery, I guess. Yeah.
I'd love to put a question quickly to everyone in the room, like where are you connecting with the mystery? Where are you getting nourished? Where are you connecting with the sacred?
It'd be lovely to hear or to see in the chat. How are you connecting with the sacred? Felicitas.
Very much in the everyday. You mentioned gardening for yourself, but I think it is very much in the everyday in an attempt to be as mindful, in other words, as present with every action. Whether that's the mundane, like the ironing or the gardening or the walking in the walking, rather than going for a walk. Present in it. That is really important for me. I also wanted to say, I hear what you say, Jacob, about what you find in what the church offers for you where you currently are in Mexico. There are two things about this for me. First of all, the church in Mexico, Catholic Church in Mexico, was established through imperialism, through the Spanish bringing Christianity to Mexico. So there is that something is in there for me that makes me ever so slightly uncomfortable. And the other thing, listening to everybody and thinking along, Christianity has only been around for 2,000 years. That seems to us an incredibly long time. But we human beings have been on this earth for much, much longer, and with spirituality right from the start. So I think what is so important for me is the inclusion of spiritual practices. And that includes what we have learned from indigenous populations about plant spirit medicine. So I just wanted to bring this in as at the end, just to widen the lens a little bit.
Yeah, I love that contribution, and I also really appreciate how Ligare has really put that piece of the conversation at the core. This question of colonial and anti-colonial and mutually transformative encounter. And just as we look to the past, I see that occurring in the present moment. One of the things that's been really fascinating for me, being here, is also learning about the ways in which that encounter between Christianity of the Spanish and the indigenous population, whilst at times really fully imperial and colonial, in other respects also was much more complex, much more gradual, not necessarily something that was forced, and also something which amalgamated and kind of stacked on top of traditions that were already living in the land. And so that colonial enterprise never really fully succeeded in conquering what it sought to conquer as well. And so I'm very curious, the Shipibo tradition, in particular in Peru, is a tradition that has not been conquered, but has amalgamated Christ into its kind of cosmic vision. And they're an ayahuasca centered lineage. And so I'm very interested in what does it mean for us to actually be in the melt and the meeting point of these things? And as you say, the depth of that which has come before Christianity as well. And I do think the plant medicines are a portal to go there.
Yes, I like that. I think we can. So my grandparents were missionaries in Africa, so that now carries quite a lot of weight, and yet actually what I hear from where they were missionaries is that there was a lot of collaboration and interchange of wisdom and even like medical knowledge, because they established a hospital there. So yeah, it's there is something to answer to for sure, and it's nuanced, and there are a lot of shades to the story. Hmm. Okay. I wonder if that's an okay time to sort of bring that part of the conversation to an end. Thank you for all the comments. Lots of appreciation, Jacob. Thank you. I think people have really enjoyed and been enlivened by what you've brought us. So thanks for that. And just to say, yeah, lovely to see you. Those of you who are in the UK group, we've got Megan Holloway coming next month to talk about the exciting things going on in Ligare. There are meetings that some of you might attend at midnight our time, but because they're not very UK friendly or European friendly, Megan's going to come and visit us specially to talk it through with us. So great to see any of you there.
We will be sending out an email. We did record the launch event we had on Wednesday. We'll get that out to everyone. But I think that Megan, I'm glad she's doing that. That's really
it'll be lovely. I mean, lovely
get to meet you all too. It's tough. It gets harder the farther west you go to try to find a time that works for everybody. But Jacob, Annette, I would love you to have the last word, but I just want to thank you both for this. I felt my body over the course of that conversation just quiet down. So you're onto something, Jacob, and for sure. And Ed, thank you as always for facilitating. You did a wonderful job.
So yeah, Jacob, wishing you well in the work you're doing and the journey you're on, and just wish you all of God's goodness in it, and where it takes you. It feels very trustworthy.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. Blessing received, and just an honor to be here and dialogue with all of you today. If any of you would like to follow along and continue the conversation, I'm actually doing gifted soul journey sessions all through the next few months. So the opportunity for a one-to-one dialogue is there on my website. And then I imagine many of you are on Substack. So I also dropped my Substack in Culture Pilgrim, and that's where I'm really sort of fostering the unfoldment of this. And I really don't know where it's going to go, but it's going interesting places, as many of you will see in my just released article, Christ Ayahuasca and Erotic Soul Activation. So on that note, it's been great to be with you all, and look forward to further dialogue with Ligare in the years ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Guys,
Thanks a lot.
thanks everyone.